Okay. Okay. Hmm. Come on, man. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in just a few. And are we ready to go? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our program about Stateless, the film Stateless, also known as Apatrida. Um, we're going to have a question and answer session with the filmmaker of Stateless, Michèle Stephenson, and Rosa Iris Diendomi, the main person about whom the film is made. So, welcome. My name is Monica Fotheringham. As you can see on the screen, I'm with Diaspora Cultural Curators, and it has been my privilege to bring Caribbean film, to program Caribbean film for people of Atlanta for the past 13 years. And now, because of the pandemic, an unintended advantage is that we can take our programming wider. So we are joining with the Luminal Theater for this program. Curtis John and Jackie Brown are the programmers there, and it is my pleasure to welcome everybody to this program about Stateless. Um, now, the let me tell you something about the filmmaker, and I just have to tee up my information here. So, our filmmaker this evening is Michèle Stephenson, and Michèle is a Haitian filmmaker. She's of Haitian and Panamanian parentage and former human rights attorney. She is committed to making personal human stories that are too often excluded from the mainstream media, as you will see with this story of Stateless. She and her husband Joe Brewster founded the RADA Film Group with a mission to tell stories about communities that have been neglected by the mainstream media and contribute to the American narrative mosaic. Together, while raising a family in Brooklyn, New York, Brewster and Stevenson have directed and produced documentary and fiction films. In 2008, they directed Slaying Goliath, a documentary that follows 10 days in the life of their son's fifth grade basketball team from Harlem as they experience a culture clash at a national tournament in suburban Florida. They also produced and directed Faces of Change, which follows 5 activists on 5 continents facing racism in their communities. Now, in 1999, Michèle and her husband set out to document the experiences of their son and his best friend from the time both boys entered kindergarten at a private Manhattan prep school through their upcoming high school graduation. In 2012, in the documentary film American Promise, their goal was to closely examine the coming of age and school experiences of 2 middle-class African American boys at the Dalton School, a predominantly white prep school, in the context of the persistent U.S. achievement gap. American Promise was broadcast on POV in 2013. Michèle and Brewster are Sundance Institute Fellows, Tribeca All Access Fellows, and recipients of the Tribeca Gucci Fund for Documentary Film for the 13-year longitudinal documentary. American Promise is the centerpiece of a transmedia engagement campaign that will use mobile web and interactive technology to help propel young men of color to success. Her work has appeared on PBS, Showtime, MTV, and other outlets. Her honors include Best Film Directed by a Woman of Color at ADFF, Grand Jury Prize for Best Documentary at ABFF also, Diversity Award at Silver Docs International Documentary Film Festival, and the Henry Hampton Award for Excellence in Film and Digital Media. Michèle is one of the founders and has co-produced several short documentaries in The Conversation, a series of op-ed documentaries for the New York Times, including An Education in Equality, A Conversation with White People on Race, and A Conversation with Black Women on Race. Her 2020 film, Stateless, which we are about to discuss, was a Canadian Screen Award nominee for Best Feature-Length Documentary at the 9th Canadian Screen Awards in 2021. Now, Rosa Iris Diendomi, let me just have that teed up properly. So Stateless follows Rosa Iris Diendomi, a young Dominican lawyer and immigration advocate of Haitian origin, as she struggles to run for Congress in the Dominican Republic. She does community work, and this film follows her very closely. Now, Rosa's English is limited, so we will also have an interpreter working. So you will hear me stop in the midst of some questions or a thought or whatever, just to allow our interpreter to do her work. And we will also have Emmanuel Boteau of the Haitian Institute of Atlanta. He is going to be one of our panelists also, answering questions. Now, before I go any further, I need to point out that we realized that Eventbrite was having a problem with letting people in, giving them the link and the passwords to the film. So Jackie from the Luminal, she has addressed that problem. The links have been sent to everybody who has already RSVP'd. And since the film is going to be available until July 3rd, she is going to send out that information every day as long as there are more people RSVPing. So I hope that that will solve that problem, and we apologize for any inconvenience. So without any further ado, we will get started with questions. And just to let you know, audience, you will have a chance to put your questions in the chat and have them addressed when I'm finished my part of the conversation. So, my first question is for Michèle. And you know, I don't want it to be questioned so much as a conversation. My daughter has been schooling me, Janelle has been schooling me the right way to do this. It looks really easy when she does it, but I realize it's not. Yes. But I want to know, Michèle, how you came to make this film. How did you know about Rosa and her story, what she was doing in the DR?
Okay, well, thank you for having me, and I apologize for the background noise. But I will hopefully let me know if you're having a hard time hearing me. So, sort of my interest in sort of the what was going on between Haiti and the DR. I am originally from Haiti, and sort of grew up going back and forth pretty frequently to family. But also I have family that have married and lived in the DR over the years. And I've always, like growing up, heard kind of the roots behind this sort of love-hate relationship that exists. Because it is a complex relationship, obviously. And during the my connection with Dominicans of Haitian descent and the work that was going on actually dates back to one of the films you were talking about, Faces of Change, where I met a very significant leader in the movement in the DR. Her name is Sonia Pierre, and she created the organization MUDA, which is for women of Dominican women of Haitian descent, and she did a lot around the rights of recognizing the rights of Dominicans of Haitian descent and the discrimination they were facing. And this is before the Supreme Court decision that happened in 2013. So I built a relationship with her and the work that I was doing, although they weren't part of that story. We met multiple times. And when the earthquake happened in Haiti, I've gotten some money from public media to go down there after 4 weeks after the earthquake to really document what was going on, like bearing witness to the Haitian collaboration with other Haitians. But also because of my exposure to Sonia Pierre, I also knew that there was collaboration between young Dominicans and young Haitians around pushing against the stereotypes, but also mutual aid around the issue with the earthquake and what had happened and the devastation. So when the sentencia happened in 2013, I was just coming out of American Promise in our community engagement work. And, you know, a lot of the films that we do, you know, they revolve around racial justice, but also centering this question of anti-Blackness and how can we tell stories that really fight against that from a personal and systemic level. So when the sentencia happened in 2013, I felt like, you know, this is the island I was born on. I have ancestors that date back to the Haitian Revolution, actually, who even signed the Constitution back in 1804, and really felt that this was an opportunity for me to bring my skill set into action. So I connected with people who knew Sonia, who were part of MUDA, who were also working in this collaboration work, and they brought me to this organization called Reconocido, which is an organization run by Dominicans of Haitian descent, specifically around the issue of statelessness and gaining papers. And so they connected me to Rosa, who had been doing work there and had been doing work in the sugarcane communities. And when I met her, I felt like in terms of documentary storytelling, you really couldn't ask for a better partner, because she was very open and really willing to take this journey with me and be vulnerable and really get our hands dirty in terms of the stories that needed to be told. And so she was a guide in the process.
And Michèle, can you explain? You mentioned sentencia in 2013. What exactly is that?
Well, maybe Rosa can explain it better. I'll give a little bit of a description. The sentencia is the Constitutional Court of the Dominican Republic brought down a decision after there was an appeal by a specific plaintiff who had lost her passport, her right to her passport, and basically said that she had no right to her passport. Her name was Juliana de Guise, and instilled a ruling that said people who were born in the Dominican Republic dating back to 1929, specifically targeting Dominicans of Haitian descent with that date, no longer had, that their birth certificates were no longer valid. that they were annulled, and they basically rendered over 200,000 people stateless from one day to the next. But I think, Rosa, maybe you can give a little more context.
Okay, Rosa, can you explain to us or elaborate on the sentencia in 2013?
Rosa, quiere saber ella si puedes elaborar sobre la sentencia del 2013.
Por supuesto, claro.
Of course I can.
Como decía Michelle, en 2013 el Tribunal Constitucional,
like Michelle was saying, in 2013, the Constitutional Tribunal,
que es el más alto tribunal del país,
which is the highest court of the country,
dictó una sentencia
dictated a sentence
que le quita o le quitó la nacionalidad de forma retroactiva.
That nationality was removed retroactively
A más de 200,000 personas,
more than 200,000 people,
que nacieron en República Dominicana,
which were born in the Dominican Republic
entre 1929 al 2013.
From 1929 to 2013.
Lo interesante es que estas personas son solo los hijos de migrantes haitianos.
The interesting thing about this is that these people that they targeted are children of Haitian descendants,
sí,
who were born in Santo Domingo.
Exacto. ¿Y por qué digo que solo a estas personas? Porque aunque en términos generales se refiere a hijos de migrantes en condición irregular, en la práctica solo se aplicó a los descendientes de haitianos.
And why do I say that? That even though it was in generality, it meant everybody, but it was only applied to Haitian descendants.
Entonces, esa sentencia dejó a miles de personas que buscaban le devolvieran el acceso a sus documentos, los dejó sin nacionalidad.
And so thousands of people were left who were looking for their nationality, their documents, they were left stateless.
Exacto.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And another thing I want to follow up on, I was going to ask this question later on, Michelle, but I was, you did touch on it somewhat, that I wanted to know what challenges you faced in the actual filming process, because I looked at it again. I watched the documentary again last night for the second time, and I found it so close, so intimate. Were there any challenges, or how did you get, to achieve that in filming, especially such difficult material?
Well, I think there are multiple levels to that. One is what I mentioned earlier, is having a partner like Rosa Iris to really help guide not only her own story and her ability to trust us in how we were going to tell her story and be vulnerable and kind of expose herself to us was a really key. I mean, that was really key to being able to capture the scenes and the elements that we captured. I mean, we were gaining access to communities because people trusted Rosa and her work. So that was that was very important. I think a bigger challenge that I felt most concerned about was the undercover camera. And not so much for myself, but really for Rosa Iris and Teófilo and our field producers, who were really taking a big risk to wear the undercover cameras in these government offices. In the car, we had planted multiple different camera lenses undercover at the checkpoints with the military that was staying. So for me, that was a very, very nerve-wracking time. But it again is a testament to the fact that these are warriors on the ground who are willing to take risks to get the story out and to really explain the extent to which the hatred exists and the obstacles, the state-sanctioned obstacles exist. The third thing I would say is really about accessing Gladys Feliz, right? The right-wing ultra-nationalist, what's interesting about her is we basically went through a casting process. She was not the first person that we were thinking about, but the other people were mostly men that we interviewed, and their vitriol and aggression was so difficult for me to handle in terms of a day-to-day basis. They kind of wore their hatred on their sleeves that I had to dial back. And when we finally found Gladys, two things I would just note, and then I'll stop there. One is Gladys, in some ways, is an important representation of the face of hatred, of anti-Black hatred, in a way that's very subtle and complicated, because the way she presents, you know, she could be my neighbor, she could be an aunt or a cousin, but what comes out is really the depth of internalized oppression, especially that, you know, outside of the DR, she would probably be considered Black as well. So I felt that in terms of representation, the way she presented was a really important part of Dominican society and larger Latinx society too, in terms of the extent of anti-Black hatred that exists, whose story needs to be told in terms of representing her as a really important obstacle to what people like Rosa Iris are trying to do. The other thing with Gladys is I was initially concerned that, you know, she was going to be asking me a lot of questions about myself as a filmmaker, and she never really ever asked me anything. She really just wanted to tell her story. And so I would ask one or two questions and she would just really try to convince me of her worldview. And really never found out in our exchange that I was actually of Haitian descent. So I was a little bit undercover with her as well. And that took a toll. That took an emotional toll.
That's exactly my next. Well, my one follow-up question was going to be if you ever felt worried for your security at any time. And I actually have a question about how you handled your emotions with this difficult material, because I'll tell you. So I will watch a film several times, and each time I get something different from it, watching the same film. Last night, I felt anger, a good amount of anger at this film, because it just reminded me of the racist dog whistling of our former president here in the US. A lot of the narrative that she was saying was literally the same thing, word for word. And I was so angry. And that was, yeah, I'm glad to hear you address how you handled your emotions, and the fact that, you know, I'm guessing filmmakers are expected to be objective, but you did have some emotional reaction to the material you were dealing with. Anything else you wanted to say about any other difficulties you had emotionally with filming?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Sandra, maybe can you translate for Rosa so she has a sense of the conversation?
Rosa, if you give me a second, I will. Rosa, ella acaba de decir la señora Mónica que ella vio por segunda vez la película y le dio un coraje bien fuerte en esta segunda vez, y que la muchacha esta Gladys, la señora Gladys, representaba todo lo que nuestro presidente formal de los Estados Unidos estaba repitiendo, casi vomitando, casi lo mismo, el mismo racismo, las mismas palabras, casi todo lo mismo que nuestro presidente anterior. Eso es lo que...
Yes. So just two things I'll add to that. I mean, it was very toxic. It felt like a toxic. Mm-hmm. I would spend days with Gladys, and and I wouldn't respond. Right, I wouldn't say anything. Would just let her say what she had to say, and I was somewhat undercover, and so it felt like a bath of toxic, breathing toxic pollution in me, literally. And when I would go back to my hotel, I would actually spend mornings really just crying, crying
Wow.
to sort of process all of this, because it's not only anger, but it's also, it's sad. There's a sadness to that also, because the one thing I do know out of this that I sort of knew before going in, but I'm certainly convinced of now, is that I will never convince anyone like Gladys. This is a worldview. This is a religious zealotry, right? Because it's a belief system that has its own internal logic, right? That doesn't, even if it's faced with the facts, it will not change its perspective. So it grounded me in really actually being even more invested in we are that, and knowing that we are in a battle of narratives, and that in movement building, we have to bring the people along who are sort of in the middle and can be convinced to really fight a fight that's about about taking up the narrative space, both in terms of understanding history, but also the understanding the lived experiences of people today.
And what I found, it's really, like you said, it's such an entrenched belief system. And I know for a fact that there are people in the DR who look like me who do not self-identify as Black. And that is the situation, right? Michelle and Sandra, can you just have Rosa confirm that also, that people my complexion in the DR don't self-identify as Black?
Rosa, que dice Mónica que la gente del color de ella, que no se identifica como morenos, como gente de color, que si eso es correcto.
Yes, and you know, it's so entrenched. What I'm going to do at this time, I also do a Caribbean story time, and I don't know if you can see this book. I found this book and I read it this year. It's titled "If Dominican Were a Color," and it's by Silly Recio, illustrated by Brianna McCarthy. And it's really a book that's a love letter to young Dominican children of, you know, who look like us, to say that Black is beautiful. And in the back, you know, she has one of the longest author's notes I have ever seen in a picture book. And it's just talking about this whole situation that she had to address in her children's picture book. But yes, If Dominican Were a Color, and it's available at independent bookstores if anybody wants to get it for their children. It was a lovely book, a beautiful book, talking about all the colors of the DR, but with that undercurrent of, you know, that anti-Blackness that's really vitriolic, it sounds like, just in seeing this film, and is so entrenched. Rosa, I wanted to know, do you know about how many people in the DR, how many Haitians, how many Dominicans of Haitian descent in the DR are now stateless, are now considered stateless?
Rosa, que cuántas personas de dominicanos de descendencia haitiano hoy día están apatriados, están sin estado.
Estimated.
Están en condición de apatria.
Un estimado.
Uh-huh.
Ok. Bueno, sí, eso le iba a decir. Nosotros no tenemos un censo para decir exactamente cuántas personas hay en esta condición. Sin embargo, tenemos la encuesta nacional de migrantes, que la última se realizó en 2017 y señala que hay más de 200,000 personas sin documento. Sin embargo,
we do not have we don't have a census, but we do have Department of Immigration that has information, and as of 2017, there's more than 200,000 stateless Dominicans of Haitian descent.
What's that here again, Sandra?
200, as of 2017, 200, more than 200,000.
Uh-huh.
Exacto. Entonces,
Okay.
Es una encuesta, o sea, no es un estudio profundo como un censo, es una encuesta.
It's just an inquiry. It was a questionnaire. It's not a census like we have here in the United States.
Okay.
Esto como una muestra de que sí tenemos personas que no tienen un documento.
That shows that we have people without documents.
Pero el Estado como tal no reconoce que en República Dominicana haya apatridia.
But the state itself, the Dominican, the country does not recognize that there is statelessness.
Oh, it doesn't recognize it.
No lo reconoce.
No. Eso ha sido una gran batalla con el gobierno pasado que terminó en agosto 2020. Y el nuevo gobierno, vamos a ver cómo asume este problema.
That's been a battle with the current government that ended in August of 2020, and we want to see how the new government is going to deal with this issue.
Sin embargo, al día de hoy tenemos personas que nacieron en Dominicana.
Nevertheless, today we have people who were born in Dominican Republic,
que no conocen otra tierra, no hablan ni siquiera el creol.
They don't know any other country. They don't even speak Creole.
Y digo que no hablan creol no porque eso lo haga menos dominicano, menos merecedor de derecho.
Cool.
And I don't say that they don't speak Creole because that makes them less Dominican or less with rights.
Sino porque siguen las políticas de discriminación y segregación.
Because I say it because the politics of discrimination and segregation continue.
Donde personas que no tienen hoy día ningún documento,
people who nowadays have no documents,
ni el Estado ha proveído una vía para reconocerle el derecho a la nacionalidad.
And the state has not provided any recourse to recognize their nationality.
Y Michelle decía algo interesante cuando hacía como que una reflexión acerca de Gladys.
Michelle was saying something interesting when she was reflecting about Gladys.
Gladys es el reflejo de esa ideología que hay en la mayoría de los dominicanos en cierto nivel, donde entiende que están echando una causa justa por defender al país.
Gladys is one of the representatives of the ideology of Dominican people who are representing what they think is correct for the country.
Entonces, también escuché el comentario que hacía la señora doña Mónica con referencia a que personas de su color se consideran blancas.
I also heard the comment from Miss Monica that people of her color, they consider themselves white.
Y es el gran problema que tenemos, un racismo y discriminación estructural.
And that is one of our biggest issues that we have, racism and discrimination, structural racism and discrimination.
Porque tú te encuentras que en el ID de los dominicanos te encuentras cualquier color de piel menos negro.
Because in the ID of Dominicans, you find any color of skin minus black. Black is not included.
Wow.
Te ponen indio, indio claro, indio oscuro, pero nunca se asume el negro como el color de la piel.
They mention, she's using the word Indian, which would be like native, light-skinned native, a little darker-skinned native, but never black.
Entonces ahí vemos que es una lucha constante desde las estancias de poder para que podamos transformar esa realidad.
And there we realize that we have a lot of issues, even from up above, the powers up above.
Finalmente, un país de mayoría negra que no asume sus herencias africanas.
And also a country major of African descendant or who do not recognize that heritage.
That's deep. That's really deep and really sad. And
Es profundo y bien triste, dice Mónica.
Yes, Rosa, do you travel back and forth to the DR from the US? Do you travel back and forth? And are you concerned for your safety and your family's safety?
Rosa,
You do that?
que si usted viaja de los Estados Unidos a la República Dominicana y si estás preocupada por tu seguridad y la seguridad de tu familia.
Bueno, en 2017 fue el año como... Ok, gracias. Disculpen, que es que estamos en el aeropuerto.
Sorry, we're at the airport.
Con mi pequeño.
Yes.
That's my son, that's my young one.
Pero, bueno, como le decía, realmente el 2017 fue un año difícil para nosotros.
In 2017, it was a very difficult year for us.
Porque después de 4 o 5 años recibiendo amenazas de distintas formas,
because after 4 to 5 years of receiving threats, of different types of threats,
en el 2017 nos dieron señales de que sí podían materializar esas amenazas.
And in 2017, we got proof that those threats could actually be carried out, that they could be manifested.
Mi hijo mayor en una ocasión se lo llevaron de la escuela.
In one occasion, my oldest son was taken from school.
Wow.
Y se dieron otros hechos que al final tuve que decidir salir de República Dominicana para guardar la integridad física de mis hijos y mía.
Other events happened that made me decide to leave Dominican Republic with my children because of fear of harm, bodily harm.
Y para mí ha sido una de las decisiones más difíciles en mi vida porque, bueno, si ven en el documental, yo le insistía tanto a Juan Teófilo que la lucha tenemos que echarla dentro del país.
It was one of the most difficult decisions and that I had to make and to leave because, like I said to Teófilo, if you've seen the documentary, the fight has to be within the country.
Sin embargo, cuando de verdad no hubo respuesta por parte de las autoridades dominicanas, pese a todas las denuncias que hacíamos.
The Dominican police was not backing us up, even though we went many times to let them know they were not backing us up.
La decisión fue esa, salir, abandonar todo lo que nos costó muchos años de trabajo construir.
And that was a decision to abandon everything that took many, many years to construct, all the work we had done.
Solo por la intolerancia, el racismo, la xenofobia y discriminación de un grupo que estaba muy enquistado en el poder también.
Only because of the xenophobia, the intolerance, the racism, and of the political party that was then in place.
Okay. Well, this is really very deep. We're also going to introduce Dr. Emmanuel Bouteau. He's with the Haitian Institute of Atlanta. And Emmanuel, hearing this conversation, what level of familiarity do you have with the statelessness of the Haitians in the DR? And is there anything that the Haitian diaspora abroad can do to help or is doing to help?
Yes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Monica, for having me join this amazing panel. I watched the film with a lot of sadness and very deep concern. And in terms of what's happening in the DR, I have not had very much experience going into the DR to talk with those who are living as stateless. But I've dealt with those who have come back to Haiti. So I'm very familiar with what happens when Haitians who are uprooted from the DR and sent to Haiti, of course, where they are often very well received by certain communities. I'm thinking of, for instance, in the town of Petite Rivière de la Tibonite, where a whole village was constructed to help receive them and to help them receive jobs. And so it's quite challenging, as you can imagine, even coming back to Haiti and not having say, the language skills, for instance. Someone who grew up in the DR who speaks Spanish, even with the best efforts Haitians can provide, is often not sufficient. And you find that many of those people would rather return to the DR and and reestablish their life. And I think that was the case with the one man in Belader who wanted to go back because that was the country that he knew. So I'm familiar enough to know that this film is extremely powerful, extremely needed, and also to know the level of suffering that Haitians are enduring. And being an immigrant myself, living in the United States, and I like the way, Monica, that you linked what was being spoken uh, um, by the lady, the representative of the conservative side of things, Miss Felice, to link that what was happening here in the United States over the past 2 years, the kind of rhetoric, kind of vitriol that has made me feel stateless, oftentimes.
Right.
And so, and what we can do in the diaspora, and I think we need to pay closer attention to what's going on in the DR. I think we need to show more solidarity, but I think even more, we need to educate the people that are in Haiti, that are living difficult lives, that are being forced to, even now, even, I'm not talking about those that were born there, of course, but even those that are running to the DR thinking things would be better for them. I think the diaspora needs to do a better job, maybe returning to Haiti with whatever skills and resources that we have obtained from wherever we might be, and truly to build a better nation for our people. It's heartbreaking, it's heart-wrenching.
Monica, you're muted. Monica, you're muted.
Yes, Emmanuel, I don't know if you can explain this situation for me. The last trip I took out of the country was a quick weekend trip to the DR. I just have this thing where I wanted to visit a different country each year, and then the pandemic hit. But the DR, I came back from the DR on March 9th. That's how close it was to the pandemic. But I stayed at one of those all-inclusive resorts, and I immediately realized that at night when the vendors came out to sell trinkets and souvenirs on the property, they were all Haitian. So I found that a bit puzzling. And is there anybody, whether Emmanuel or Michelle or Rosa, who can explain that for me? That, the Dominicans are so, they seem to just want to cut off anything having to do, or anybody having to do with Haiti. But I saw these people, these vendors being allowed to sell souvenirs on the hotel grounds. And I also saw some people working in the hotel who were very obviously Haitian. Because I also asked them, even though I was there on vacation, I was asking people questions. So can anybody explain this situation?
Rosa, ella ha comentado de que cuando estuvo en la República Dominicana estuvo en uno de esos lugares que son exclusivos, ¿no? Pero que por las tardes, por las noches, vendían a vender cosas para traerse de regreso, y la mayoría eran haitianos. Entonces, quiere saber cómo eso pasa, ya que los dominicanos no quieren a los haitianos ahí.
Sandra, hola, si me escucha, parece que hay interferencia. Yo no he escuchado la pregunta. Está como cortándose.
She has interference. She hasn't been able to hear us at all.
Okay.
Yeah, she has interference. She has it's cutting off on her end.
Okay.
So
Emmanuel or Michelle, do either of you want to take that question? If not, I can go on to a question.
Go ahead, Emmanuel. Go ahead, Emmanuel.
I
¿Puedes oír, Rosa?
Oh, she got
Yes.
cut off.
So,
Cut off.
I mean, so there are two things to kind of unpack from that. One is racial capitalism, what is at work and what has been at work for centuries is racial capitalism. So, and in the DR, what we're looking at is the extraction and exploitation of labor that is racialized in order to keep the cost of labor low. And statelessness is just another state-sanctioned move to render people invisible, that they keep them vulnerable and fragile so they can exploit their labor. And just a distinction to make, some of the people that you who are working in these resorts, which is why the resorts are very cheap options for people to go to the DR, is because they can get this labor at a very low cost. And I just want to make these, in many cases, these are Dominicans of Haitian descent. These are people born in the DR too, not just Haitian migrants. And I think it's important to make that, to understand that. I mean, I came across people on the beach who were selling also. They weren't all Haitian migrants. There are people who were actually born in the Batey, in the sugarcane community, who are supposed to have access to their birth certificates. So, but this is part of racial capitalism. The ecosystem between the DR and Haiti is very much a mutually sort of reinforcing system where the elites have their interests kind of come together from both sides.
Yeah, if I might add.
Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Well, if I might add something here, and I agree with Michelle on this. And what's interesting is that racism doesn't work without objectification, and objectification usually goes hand in hand with exploitation. You have to render the person in something inferior, and then you can use them, even if it's just in your mind. I'm thinking of, for instance, in slavery time, both in the United States, in Haiti, how white people have never had any problems with black serving them, doing the lowly job. And so I think that's that component I think of this. I have a colleague of mine, someone I studied with just a few years ago, and she is from the Dominican Republic, and I remember her telling me that, you know, she thought the Dominicans needed to be honest about things because they relied on Haitians to do the menial job. They rely on the Haitians for the jobs, you know, that Dominicans don't want to do. So you have that component where it is indeed, you have people who want to force the Haitians out, when you have others who want to exploit them and use them to perform the tasks that are deemed too low for Dominicans to perform. So I think that's one element in that dynamic that I think is important to consider.
That's really interesting, and I like Michelle's point and your point to Emmanuel about racial capitalism and how they're mutually, you know, they need each other sort of in a weird way. So I have some questions from the chat. Let me just make sure I'm starting with the first question. And the first question is for Rosa. And this is from Jackie, who wants to know, who's asking Rosa, what was the outcome of her cousin's case?
Rosa, hay una pregunta de la audiencia para ti de una persona que se llama Jackie. Quería saber cuál fue el resultado del caso de tu primo.
Desafortunadamente.
And another part of the question is, what does the government use to determine the citizenship or nationality of a child born in the DR of a Haitian and Dominican parent?
Y parte de esa pregunta, Rosa, es que qué es lo que usa el gobierno para determinar la ciudadanía o la nacionalidad de una persona, de un niño o persona nacida en la República Dominicana de descendencia haitiana. So, ¿qué pasó con el caso de tu primo y qué usa el gobierno? ¿Qué papeles usa?
Querida Jackie, desafortunadamente Juan Teófilo, el caso de mi primo, sigue igual que como está en el documental.
Dear Jackie, unfortunately, my cousin's case, Teolófilo, it continues exactly as in the documentary.
Wow.
Pese a que Juan Teófilo ha aportado todos los documentos que le han requerido. Después de lo que está en el documental, se han hecho 2 o 3 procesos en seguimiento a su caso sin ninguna respuesta positiva.
This is even besides the fact that he's followed up 2 to 3 times with the paperwork, the documents required, and there has been no response whatsoever.
Con Juan Teófilo podemos cerrar diciendo que desafortunadamente ahora él está con cierta discapacidad.
We can say now with Teolófilo that he is, incapacitated.
Porque ha sufrido 2 accidentes cerebrovasculares.
Because he has suffered 2 strokes.
Wow.
Y eso revela el efecto de esta situación. No es solo el efecto jurídico.
And this is the effects of not only the judicial decisions, but also this whole situation.
El efecto psicológico, emocional.
The effects of psychological effects, emotional effects.
Y puede saber que a pesar de que él aportó al fondo de pensiones, a la seguridad social, hoy no puede recibir para atrás un derecho que le corresponde.
And even though when he worked, he contributed to the pension system and the help up to the government, he cannot claim that right.
Con relación a
los documentos
que usa el gobierno dominicano para determinar la nacionalidad.
The documents that the Dominican Republic's government uses to determine nationality.
La Constitución establece 2 formas para ser dominicano.
The Constitution establishes 2 ways of being considered Dominican. Mm-hmm.
El jus sanguinis, que uno de los padres sea dominicano.
One of the parents has to be Dominican.
Y el jus solis, haber nacido en suelo dominicano.
And el jus soli, which means having been born in the country.
Y esto solo tenía 2 excepciones.
And that had 2 exceptions.
Ser hijo de diplomático, hijo legítimo de un diplomático.
Be a child of a legitimate child of a diplomat.
O estar en tránsito.
Explícate de tránsito.
El tránsito es una persona que va a estar en República Dominicana por un espacio de 10 días, no más.
Or being someone who's in transit, which is like 10 days, no more than 10 days in the Dominican Republic.
Porque cualquier extranjero que estuviera en Dominicana por más de 10 días.
Because any outsider who was in Santo Domingo, in the Dominican Republic for more than 10 days.
Tenía otra condición migratoria, pero no tránsito.
Was considered under another immigration rule, but not transitory.
Y los migrantes haitianos que iban a trabajar a República Dominicana.
And the Haitian immigrants who went to the Dominican Republic to work.
Contratado, llevado por el Estado y por las empresas azucareras.
And contracted by the corporations and the sugar corporations, by the state and the sugar corporations. Mm-hmm.
Lo menos que duraban en el país eran 6 meses.
The least that they could be in the country was 6 months.
¿Qué es lo que dura la zafra?
¿Qué es lo que dura qué? Perdón.
La zafra, el tiempo de producir y cortar la caña.
Which is the amount of time, the 6 months that they cut cane and gather cane.
Entonces,
sugar cane. Uh-huh.
Sí. Para cerrar, en el 2010 cambian la Constitución.
in 2010, they changed the Constitution.
Sin embargo, la nueva constitución reconoce que son dominicanos todos los que al momento de la nueva constitución ya tenían la nacionalidad dominicana.
This new constitution recognizes everyone who at the time of this new constitution had the Dominican the Dominican citizenship.
Yeah. Entonces, el problema es que, contrario a lo que establece la ley suprema del país,
the problem is that contrary to what the supreme law of the country establishes,
a los hijos de haitianos le escriben en un libro de extranjería.
The Haitian children, they have a different type of book, type of law of outsiders.
I'm sorry, they're not Haitian children. They're children of Haitian parents. They're born in the Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Michelle.
Entonces, este libro no le otorga ninguna nacionalidad a los chicos.
That book did not give any nationality to these children of Dominican children of Haitian descent.
Y es un documento que no le sirve.
It's a document that is worthless.
Okay, I see. I have one more question because I've been advised we don't have much time left, but this question is for Michèle and Rosa. What has been the experience of touring with and screening this film and reflecting not only on the film and your life, in Rosa's case, on an emotional level? And this question is from Janelle. What has been your experience of touring with and screening this film, reflecting not only on the film and your life, in Rosa's case, on an emotional level?
Michelle, you're going to take this one, or you want me to?
Rosa, can you? I would like Rosa. Rosa, can you? Yeah, and then I can just add a couple of sentences after.
Rosa, la pregunta es que ¿cuál ha sido tu experiencia de viajar con esta película y reflejar en esta película y en tu caso emocionalmente a qué nivel te ha afectado?
Mira, viéndolo por el lado positivo,
looking at it from the positive side,
es una herramienta que nos ayuda a que las personas que están fuera de República Dominicana,
it's a tool that helps us for those who are Dominicans who are outside of Dominican Republic,
puedan entender la realidad de la apatridia, la desnacionalización y sus efectos.
They can understand, those that are outside of Dominican Republic, that they can understand the statelessness of those that are outside.
Y la desnacionalización.
And sí.
Pero igual, cada vez que la veo, me produce muchas emociones encontradas.
Every time I see it, it produces a lot of emotions.
Porque es que la situación sigue igual, latente en el país.
Because the situation is still exactly the same in the country.
Personas que no pueden seguir sus sueños.
People that cannot pursue their dreams.
De estudiar.
Of studying.
Tener un trabajo digno, un seguro médico.
Have a dignified job, medical coverage.
O otros que han sido degradados a ciudadanos de segunda categoría o tercera.
And others who have been degraded to citizenships of second and third levels.
Por el origen de sus padres.
Because of the origin of their parents.
Como que tendríamos que vivir eternamente sintiéndonos menos o con vergüenza.
That we would have to live eternally feeling like we're less or ashamed.
Por de donde venimos.
From where we come from.
Pero volviendo al punto positivo, esto me lleva
returning to the positive of the situation.
Porque se escucha nuestra voz más allá de nuestra frontera.
Because our voice is heard beyond our boundary of the country boundaries.
Y podemos decir con orgullo, somos de ascendencia haitiana.
And we can say proudly, we are descendants of Haitians.
Y nos vamos a mantener en pies de lucha hasta lograr que se reconozca nuestro derecho.
And we are going to still continue to stand and claim until our rights are recognized.
Okay, and I have one question that I think this is going to be the wrap-up question before I do my closing. Rosa, for those of us outside of Haiti, outside of the DR, who really seriously want to help the stateless in the Dominican Republic, the Haitian stateless, what can we do to help? And Emmanuel, you might be able to jump in here. What can we who seriously want to help? And I like Michèle, and I thank Michèle for using this film, because I have come to recognize that film is, can be used as a weapon, to change minds. And what can we do to help? We who have been angered or just been emotional over seeing this film. What can we do to help in the diaspora? Those of us who are in the States, Canada, Europe, whatever. What can we do who seriously want to help?
Rosa, ella quiere saber las personas que estamos afuera en la diáspora de ya sea Canadá, Europa, que están en serio, que queremos ayudar porque nos han dado mucho coraje, muchas emociones esta película. ¿Qué podemos hacer para ayudar a estos dominicanos haitianos que están apatriados? ¿Qué podemos hacer?
Lo primero es sumar nuestra voz, que se siga la gente enterando de qué está pasando en Dominicana.
The first thing is to raise the voice so that people can recognize what is happening in the Dominican Republic.
Que no está resuelto el problema.
That the situation has not resolved itself.
Y que es el Estado Dominicano el que tiene la obligación de darle respuesta a los afectados.
And it is the state of Dominican Republic that has the obligation to answer the ones that are stateless.
Entonces podemos, otro gran desafío que tenemos son las limitaciones económicas.
One of the other things that we have is our economical limits.
Para las organizaciones que acompañan los casos de los afectados.
For the organizations that take on the people who are affected.
Pero creo que podemos hacer carta y enviarla a la embajada, o sea, desde afuera de la diáspora, a la embajada dominicana.
I think that we can write letters and send them to the Dominican embassy.
Okay. What about Congress people?
A los diputados también.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, also Congress people.
Sí, delegaciones diplomáticas, embajadores en la OEA, porque tenemos que volver a presionar desde afuera para que se retome este tema.
We have to force them from outside so that the ambassadors, the Congress people, the government, so that they can once again take up this cause. We have to pressure them from the outside.
I'm sorry. No, Emmanuel.
Y que esta vez.
Okay. Okay. Oh. Were you finished, Rosa?
¿Habías terminado, Rosa?
Okay.
No, solo quería actualizar que esta vez ojalá tengamos realmente soluciones efectivas, o sea, no solo para bajar la presión en los medios, sino que el gobierno se compromete en solucionar y garantizar los derechos.
And this time we hope that that through the media, that the government would commit to resolving this issues.
Okay. Emmanuel, do you know of any lobbying that's taking part in Washington, D.C.? Is there any lobbying on behalf of the Haitians?
Right now, there was some movement back in 2013, certainly, but today I'm not sure how much this is on the consciousness of people, and that's why this film is so important. So I'm not aware of any right now, and I think, and having seen the film, it seems to me that we need to begin anew. We need to begin anew. And to that point, as Rosa was saying, we need from the United States, pressure I think can be brought to bear through the U.S. Congress. I think people like us who are living in the United States, for instance, it's the human rights issue. The human rights issue.
It is. It
And
is.
we need to speak out. We need to speak out. Absolutely.
Yes, because it reminds me of the situation of the Palestinians in the state of Israel, which I saw with my own eyes visiting there. And when a country treats some citizens as less than, things are never going to change. And until, if any of us think that we're better than anybody, it's things are just never going to change. We're all equal, and we need to treat each other as such, whether it's in Haiti or the DR, whether it's in Israel and Palestine, wherever it is, as long as we think of ourselves as better than other people, things are not going to change. I really want to thank all of you all for this very, very interesting talk this evening, and just for shedding a light on this, this serious situation. Michèle, I thank you for making this beautiful film about a very difficult subject, but one that needed to be made, needed to shed your light. And you are certainly fulfilling your mission of shedding light on what the mainstream media won't shed light about. I was actually surprised the other day when I saw the write-up on NBCnews.com about this film in advance of it airing on PBS. So thank you very much for making this film. I know it's not easy to get films made. Thank you for doing this. Rosa, I want to thank you for opening up yourself to this film, to being vulnerable, to basically endangering yourself to have this film made about you, because we needed to see it for ourselves, what the situation is. And, it makes me wonder, but it might be a double-edged sword if we were to say boycott going to the DR for holidays. Then, everybody's going to suffer. The Haitians who depend on those jobs are going to suffer. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Emmanuel, for bringing your information to bear. And I certainly want to continue working with you in this work that I do in Caribbean, just highlighting aspects of the Caribbean culture. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is that even though I'm from Jamaica in the Anglo-Caribbean, the Caribbean is much more than the English-speaking Caribbean. It's a Spanish-speaking Caribbean. It's the Dutch-speaking Caribbean. It's the French-speaking Caribbean. And I like to be able to just show the Caribbean in all of its diversity. In the case of this Haiti and DR situation, warts and all. And I know I've heard that Haiti has some of the most beautiful beaches, and people don't know about them. So that's a whole other story right there. But thank you so much. Curtis and Jackie from the Lumino, thanks for joining with me. Thanks for joining with us. And the audience who has tuned in for this, I thank you all so much. And again, I want to encourage you, if you have not seen the film yet, or if you were one of the people that encountered the glitch from Eventbrite, please go ahead and try and watch it. As long as you have RSVP, Jackie will send you an email with the links. So thanks so much. And I want to thank my family for for helping me with making this possible. They are hard on me sometimes, people. My oldest Janelle is a film lecturer. They are hard on me, I have to tell you. But they keep me honest. So I just want to thank them for doing that, and Jackie for running tech, Curtis for your support and just helping us. And on a point of personal privilege at this time, many of you who have been coming to my films over the years, used to see little Jordan, the little girl giving out pencils and papers and refreshments and so on. Well, little Jordan is all grown up now, and she just graduated from university at Georgetown in DC and is going to grad school. So I just wanted, because that's where she really got to have a lot of agency and just helping out, almost like her first job, just being my right hand for many years of showing my films. So again, this has been a very interesting program. Thank all of you for your input. Janelle and Lisa for your questions. And I hope to see you next year. We don't know in what format, but we shall see. So all the best, everybody. Stay safe. And please, people can go back and watch both of these programs through Diaspora Cultural Curators Facebook page or through the Luminal Theater. Thanks again, and we will see you.
Thank you.